is Megan McMillan, Director of Weatherization Programs and Services at Community Housing Partners Energy Solutions in Virginia, better known as CHP. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded. I'm sure you heard the little recording come on. And we will email the slides out to you in about a week once it's over with. If you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A feature anytime during the session, and we will get to a point where we will answer those. Chase, if you can put up the slide that I need to read.
Is that showing up for you?
Yep, I got it.
Okay.
So I just have to let you guys know that this presentation was created by the National Community Action Partnership in the performance of the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of State and Community Energy Programs using the grant number 10310. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this material are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the views of the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of State and Community Energy Programs. So that being said, Chase and Megan, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Keisha. And thank you, NCAP, and to Department of Energy for making this an opportunity that we can share some knowledge and lessons learned serving specifically low-rise multifamily in the Weatherization Assistance Program. As Keisha mentioned, I'm the founder and principal of Greenbound Consulting, and we're a bespoke consulting services providing insights for organizations navigating, advancing, and catalyzing energy affordability, primarily through weatherization. A little about myself. I started at CHP Energy Solutions with Megan back in 2010. I'm an ARA baby. I got started at the Weatherization Training Center at CHP. Down in Christiansburg, Virginia. I'm based out of Richmond, Virginia now, and much like Megan will share with you, we rose through the ranks. I wound up leading some of our utility programs, our leverage programs, advocated successfully for Virginia's Weatherization Deferral Repair Program, which predates DOE's Weatherization Readiness Fund by about a year and a half, and then along with Megan, worked to provide weatherization services across the Commonwealth of Virginia. I started Greenbound in, say, September of 2023, and I've been pleased to work with NCAP as a contract consultant for the last, say, about 18 months or so. And I won't read through the rest of my bio, but I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Megan McMillan, who is kind enough to offer on short notice to support this session. Megan?
Thank you, Chase. Good afternoon, everyone. And yes, thank you to NCAP and DOE for putting these sessions together. Yes, I did join on a short notice, but I'm very happy to be here and hopefully to provide some real life commentary on all the dryness of WPNs and all the guidance that we're supposed to follow. It can get in the weeds, but it can be done, and we are proof to show that. I have been with CHP for a total of about 22, 23 years, but in energy solutions for the past 16. I started as an administrative assistant in 2009. Like Chase said, I was an ARA baby, and I've just rose through the ranks and did a lot of different things at CHP. I've been the director of weatherization programs in our services that correspond with weatherization since July of 2020, so right during the pandemic. We're a large weatherization provider, the largest in Virginia. We cover 43 localities in the state of Virginia, and we do multifamily weatherization and have run into all kinds of different scenarios, but we've worked through them and we continue to do multifamily weatherization. And I'm just really excited to be able to be a part of this to, again, kind of lend some real life experiences. Multifamily is a historically underserved population, and it does a lot of good when you're able to get into these folks' homes and make a difference for them, as they need it just as anyone living in a site built or a manufactured home. So I'm definitely not going to read my bio, but just thank you again for letting me be a part of this wonderful series.
Thank you, Megan. And I believe Keisha covered most of this, but just a reminder, if you have questions, I think the easiest way is to put them in the Q&A feature. We will hold off on real-time questions until the very end. As long as I don't drag this out too long, we'll budget in some time for questions and answers. I think everybody's familiar that this qualifies for BPI CEUs, and we will take a brief 10-minute break about midway through this 2-hour session. Come on now. So what I'd like to kind of cover at this point is the run of show, what we're looking to accomplish. This is sort of our breakdown for what we're going to be going over today. I'm going to briefly touch on, hopefully most folks attended session 1 of this multifamily weatherization series. And then the following breakdown are our high-level topics that we'll be covering. And we're attempting to shift away from the should we, could we that we covered in session 1 to how do we actually do this? How do we actually weatherize multifamily buildings? We'll be navigating federal and state regulatory landscape that can be complex, but we're attempting to demystify this throughout the session and hopefully make it actionable for you all. The idea is to, let me actually move forward here. The idea is to leave you here with clear takeaways on where to look in federal rules, make sure you understand how they apply to multifamily weatherization, and what you should be asking your grantee office. And if you guys don't mind, if there are any grantees in attendance, if you could let us know where you're coming from. I mentioned this at the start, but just to reiterate, we're focused, this session, this whole series is really focused on low-rise multifamily. We won't be focusing on high-rise or even mid-rise. We may touch on some components that may be applicable to mid-rise, but our focus is really low-rise. So in session 1, our colleagues at Optimum Performance Solutions covered the multifamily considerations, should we, could we. It was basically looking internally at your own operations. Is this a good fit? And they did that through exploring the opportunities, the challenges, and the scaling strategies that that you might want to consider looking at your internal operations. With this session, we're looking at the broader landscape, the things that are ultimately outside of your control, but you need to know about. And as a primer, the next session, session 3, we'll be focusing on scaling operations. And with that, we'll get started focusing on federal regulations framework. And what I've mentioned to Megan, this could be a bit dry. This session in particular, we're going to try to make it as entertaining as possible. And I've asked Megan to just chime in and as needed and provide some more context around what we're going to be covering. So we're going to start with federal level governance and 10 CFR 440, which hopefully everybody on this call is familiar with. This is our grounding regulation. This is what authorizes weatherization as legal framework. What this also does is it defines eligibility by building, not necessarily by property or portfolio or owner. So it's essential in multifamily weatherization work to understand that eligibility is focused on each individual building. And specifically, at least 66% of the building's units need to meet the income eligibility, and that will ultimately give you your go-ahead. And there's some nuance if you're looking at duplexes or quadplexes, the requirement is for 50% of those households to qualify, and that qualifies the entire building. So it's an important aspect to make sure you have your head wrapped around. This CFR 10 CFR 440 also sets the rules on what counts as allowable costs. So knowing these regulations, you will ultimately know what to expect. Davis-Bacon Act. So this is probably the most common barrier I hear from agencies that are keeping them from entering into multifamily weatherization. So this only really applies if your project hits 5 or more units and uses the IJA weatherization funds. This doesn't apply to DOE formula or LIHEAP transfer funds if you have those available. But if you're serving through IJA weatherization funds, you're in the prevailing wage territory. So this is not optional for IJA weatherization. It's mandatory and it cannot be waived. This applies also for contractors, but also your own staff. If you're using crews, specifically retrofit installer technicians and crew leaders, and if you have trade-specific staff on staff, it will also apply there. The best advice, set up your payroll compliance system with a small manageable project to learn the ins and outs of how Davis-Bacon compliance, what you need to do in that case. And LCP Tracker is a tool, and there are other platforms, but LCP Tracker is a tool that should help streamline this. And I'll ask Megan if there's any context you'd like to add.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you're right, Chase. Davis-Bacon is a huge barrier, and it definitely, for those who may have been around during ARA, like I was, that was the role that I started in CHP. Was I was doing manually all of their certified payroll. But ARA was, or during ARA, certified payroll was required. So if for those on the call, there might be some knowledge in your agency regarding or around Davis-Bacon or the Davis-Bacon Act and what's required. So I definitely encourage folks to seek out anyone that might have been around during that time. And like I said, it can be a barrier depending on the size of your agency, the infrastructure of your human capital or human resources division, because a lot of times with Davis-Bacon payroll, the requirements, you have to pay weekly, and that might be a change. That's a change that CHP had to make during that time of ARA. And we've changed our crews and technicians to be paid weekly now as well, because we are utilizing IJA funds for multifamily. I do want to make sure that we do say it is specific to those working on the project. It does not apply to energy auditors, QCIs, superintendents, project managers. It is only those actually working on the building themselves. So your crew techs, your crew leaders, and then subcontractors could be HVAC, plumbing, electrical, anything that's going to be paid for with IJA funds. The LCP tracker is it's the tool you have to use. That DOE I guess has a contract with, and that is how you submit. That's how you submit all of your projects. That is how you submit your certified payroll. It is a little complicated. I will not lie. It's complicated in the sense of what happens once you get a project submitted, and there's many different approval levels. I know previously at DOE, there was a gentleman who was the LCP tracker guru, I should say. I don't know if he's there any longer. I'm not sure, and I don't know who a contact would be. But I do know, like I said, submitting projects is pretty simple. I believe you can reach out to DOE headquarters to get guidance on how to submit projects. Obviously, you have to work with your state because the state has to be included in that as well. One thing that you do have to run into, or you will run into, is the prevailing wage. So the prevailing wages, depending on what or who, what trades you're going to have working on that project, they can get up there. And so if you are working with a subcontractor, say for an electrical upgrade or something like that on an IJA funded project, you have to make sure the subcontractor that you are using pays that prevailing wage for the electrician that is on site, or a laborer, or things like that. The other piece of this is most localities do not have a weatherization worker prevailing wage. So you have to kind of go with what is closest, which typically for I say us because we're all a family, we're all weatherization. Typically for us, it's going to be a laborer, or if you have somebody specific dealing with HVAC, you would use that prevailing wage. So there are definitely things you have to work through when utilizing IJA funds, dealing with Davis-Bacon. It does add a level of complexity to projects, but it is doable. Like I said, it definitely is doable, but you definitely have to make sure that you're talking with your HR folks, with your accounting folks, because that can't just be a decision that's made at the level of a weatherization director. You have to have lots of folks involved with that as well. I do see
Yeah.
there's a question in the Q&A. Is it okay is that okay, Chase?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Linda, how do we get the administrating State Department off the dime to put together the Davis-Bacon rates for, assuming that's California? We can't do any multifamily units in California until that gets done. Oh, yeah. That is a very good question. I don't know about that. Like I said, I know for us, if you're speaking specifically for like a weatherization worker prevailing wage, I know that's not required for in Virginia. When I spoke with the gentleman at DOE, that was my question, and I understood that we had to use laborer because there is no prevailing wage for weatherization worker. During ARA, there was at one time a prevailing wage for a weatherization worker. But again, I don't want to say like you could use laborer. I'm not sure how to help with that question. Maybe, I don't know, Chase or if Keisha, y'all have any insight into that.
Yeah, if there's
Um,
any questions that we can't address here, we'll definitely take those back and do some digging. And Keisha, if you want to chime in too.
well, I just saw that I didn't want to exclude Jessie to see if she had anything to add to this particular question.
No, my apologies. I thought I was just marking it as being answered live. Not that I wanted to answer it live.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we have another one from Miss Linda. Chase, do you want to?
Let's keep it moving, and we'll
Okay.
address those during the Q&A. And if anybody in the chat has the ability to respond, I'd welcome that as well. So another common barrier that we hear about is Build America, Buy America Act, or more famously known as BABA. This mandates that federally funded infrastructure projects, including those under WAP, use domestically produced materials. So this can affect your procurement strategy, especially in multifamily projects, but it's limited specifically to federally owned buildings. So in the case of weatherization, this really only applies to public housing authority properties. This applies across Formula WAP and the IJA WAP, as well as if you're working previously with any WAP enhancement innovations or CERC or CSPP grants, it would also apply then. but specifically again to public housing authority properties. This can always evolve. It may not hurt to understand where your materials are being sourced in case it is expanded. But there are also exceptions or waivers to this requirement that can be granted under specific circumstances. Like if it's, according to the bill language, it's if it's inconsistent with the public interest, if the materials aren't available domestically, or if it significantly increases project costs. But the easiest way to avoid BABA is to not weatherize public housing authority properties. Meg, is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, for folks wanting to get into the multifamily realm, I would stay away from public housing authorities, at least for your first few projects. It will just make life a lot easier because there are additional, which Chase, you'll talk about, you know, the age of the buildings next, and when NEPA comes in, and then BABA, it adds an additional layer of complication. And so if you're just getting started, I would steer away from those until you're able to kind of get the basics of approvals, you know, eligibility approvals, the actual work, QCIing, and then kind of expand to maybe identifying public housing authorities, or, you know, older buildings, older multifamily buildings.
Yeah, and Megan just touched on it. NEPA and NHPA, National Historic Preservation Act, could also be triggered if a building is over 50 years old. That's typically the threshold. It may be subject to what's referred to as Section 106. And Section 106 mandates that federal agencies consider the impact of their actions on historic properties. So DOE would have its own set of requirements to make sure that, I mean, the ultimate goal is to identify and assess potential impacts and find ways to avoid, minimize, or mitigate any potential adverse effects to the historic property. So ultimately, this doesn't mean that you can't weatherize it. It just means you'll need to work through DOE's categorical exclusion process and document your work more carefully. Let's see. So here's just a brief overview of what we covered. And this is more for reference, as you guys will have access to these slides after NCAP sends these out. So with that, we're going to transition from the federal acts and regulations to everybody's favorite subject, weatherization program notices and WAP memos. And real quick, I'm sure most folks are familiar, but just to kind of understand the differentiation between the two. Weatherization program notices are documents established that establish the overarching framework for administering funds appropriated to the Weatherization Assistance Program. They serve to provide grantees with programmatic, financial, and legal information that they can then develop into their weatherization grantee plan. WPNs are often issued annually to address changes, as well as administrative priorities or even congressional inquiries from time to time. And these highlight key issues and provide resources for grantees to incorporate in their applications for weatherization formula funds. So how they differentiate from WAP memos. These memos serve more as a more immediate communication mechanism with the WAP network. They're used more to notify grantees of upcoming events, clarify elements of existing WPNs or policies, which you'll see some examples of that here shortly, and provide opportunities for the network to provide feedback on administrative direction and even policy impacts. The first one we're going to focus on is WPN 22-12, and if you're on this webinar, I assume you guys have all been exposed to this WPN. This is like the multifamily weatherization Bible. This is your primary operating manual for DOE-funded multifamily weatherization. It covers prioritizing weatherization work based on housing type, multifamily building eligibility, property listings for use in the weatherization assistance program, average cost per unit in multifamily dwellings, buy downs and leveraging, and documentation requirements. It also clarifies eligibility thresholds, audit requirements, project submission procedures, as well as requirements for things like Davis-Bacon, BABA, and NEPA compliance, which we just covered. So first up, eligibility. This provides the guidance that's established in 10 CFR 440. And for multifamily weatherization, the building itself must qualify, not just the individual residents. And so this is where that 6650 rule comes into play that we covered earlier. And this is based on, again, individual buildings, not the entire complex. If you have a 100-unit property, 10 buildings of 10 each, you look at each individual building of those 10 units. And you must ensure that the work also benefits the residents, or they use the word tenants, and not just the property owner, which we'll talk about some more in a bit. Also covers audit protocols and what tools can be used. So you can't just use any energy audit tool on multifamily projects. DOE has to have approved certain tools for multifamily work. And for larger multifamily buildings, which are typically defined as 25 units or more, you may need to use a program like TREAT or Multia, or another DOE-approved multifamily program like eQuest. And these tools can typically account for common area loads and shared systems, which the systems that we're more familiar with on the single-family weatherization side just aren't equipped to handle. So for the smaller multifamily buildings, 5 to 24 units is how it's defined. You may be allowed to use the single-family tools like NEAT, but only if your state has a DOE approval or you request a waiver. I also want to mention the 20% production threshold. Like, what is that? So the guidance states projects must exceed DOE's 20% multifamily production threshold to use approved multifamily tools. Otherwise, each project must receive individual review. So this allows grantees and subgrantees to use those pre-approved multifamily audit tools like TREAT or NEAT, or with adjustments, or Multia, without submitting every project for case-by-case DOE review. But that's only if the grantee regularly serves a meaningful volume of multifamily units, which is defined as at least 20% of the total annual production by dwelling units. And if you're below that threshold, DOE wants additional oversight so that each multifamily project must be submitted for case-by-case review, even if you're using a DOE-approved tool.
Hey, Chase.
Yeah.
Is this where we would talk about the use of priority list?
That's coming up a little bit later.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, pulled Megan into this last minute. We'll touch on case-by-case submittals next. So when you submit a multifamily project to DOE for review, you need to complete an entire submission package. And that package is going to include the energy audit results, that includes the SIR calculations, eligibility documentation, proof of compliance with any of those federal requirements that we covered earlier, Davis-Bacon, BABA, NEPA, as applicable, and a completed multifamily case-by-case checklist. This cannot be skipped. I would encourage everyone to review this checklist before submission, and it's just a kind of a quality assurance check that DOE can confirm that you've covered all your bases. You make it easy for them to review, you're more likely to get a quicker turnaround. And this also integrates with other related guidance, specifically some WPNs that we're going to cover next. So that's 22.5, 25.4, that allows for categorical eligibility for HUD and USDA properties, respectively, rental protections that are covered in 22-13, and then also guidance for leveraging like 22-9. So altogether, WPN 22-12 is the framework, and then these other WPNs kind of fill in the gaps and make a full picture. And this is the last slide on 22-12. Don't be intimidated by it. It's long, but it's going to be your how-to manual for launching multifamily weatherization the right way. You'll hear us talk over and over, start small, a pilot project or pilot a project under case-by-case review first. Build that internal knowledge, build that muscle, train your intake, your audit, your fiscal team, and use the checklist to keep your documentation aligned. You also want to make sure that you're communicating early and often with your grantee. Their ultimate job is to support you in this. And
Chase,
Megan, anything? Yeah.
Before you go on, we do have one question that's applicable to this section.
Okay.
Denise Wells says, could you please repeat the 20% rule? We are just looking into multifamily and are primarily single family.
Yeah. So the intention of this 20% production threshold, let me go back to that slide. This is intended, the thought process with DOE is if you're producing more than 20% of your total annual production, if that's multifamily, there's an assumption that, okay, you're well versed at this, and you have a little more leeway. If multifamily accounts for less than 20% of your annual production, that's DOE's trigger to say, okay, we should probably review these jobs to make sure that they're being processed accurately, that they're fully compliant. Does that hopefully make sense?
I believe it did.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to 22.5. And this is 22-5 is HUD categorical eligibility. Which is very closely related to 25-4, which we'll talk about next. It's intended to make your lives easier, especially for multifamily projects, and it allows for what's referred to as categorical eligibility, specifically for residents in HUD assisted housing. This broadens the definition of income eligible households under DOE WAP, specifically stating if a household participates in a certain HUD means tested program, that household can be considered automatically eligible for weatherization. So this substantially reduces the administrative burden on the income verification and intake processes. Due to time, I'm going to keep it moving. I don't want to short you guys though. So some key components of 22-5. If residents are part of a HUD program like HOME or CDBG, or there's a lead hazard program with a really long acronym that I'll skip over, or public housing, then they automatically are eligible for WAP. Let's see. Some DOE requirements that you will still need to document. You can't skip the documentation for each building. You still need to keep proof of the HUD program participation in the client file. And this could be the HUD list printout or an owner certification. And we still need to verify that the project meets the 10 CFR 440 section 22, which requires that resident benefits go to the residents, not the building owner. And there's no rent increase due to weatherization, and no property enhancements that are going to be used for resale purposes. Not typically applicable for HUD properties, but it will for privately owned properties. In short, you can skip some of the income checks, but you can't skip the compliance checks. So 25-4 is virtually, I won't say identical, but very similar to 22-5, which covers USDA categorical eligibility. So it's relatively recent. This came out December 24, just last year, and it's a expansion on the categorical eligibility. It's building on that 22-5 for HUD, and it allows for households participating in USDA means tested programs to be considered automatically income eligible for WAP. So you don't need to collect pay stubs or tax forms or other income verification. While we're focused on multifamily, it also applies to single family USDA housing, and just another tool to reduce that intake burden, especially in rural or agricultural areas. So it's another shortcut. This rule really helps to bring USDA supported multifamily properties, buildings that may have been previously too documentation heavy to consider. Let's see. Some key components. Participation in USDA rental assistance or loan programs qualifies a household automatically, much like the HUD means tested programs. And there's a DOE provided USDA property list. So if you aren't familiar with the WPNs and WAP memos, quick Google search will get you right to them. And I would highly encourage you to go to the DOE's landing page for each WPN or WAP memo, because most of these or many of these have attachments. And if you open the PDF directly, you might miss those. But usually they're also linked in the PDF as well. And you can find, I've actually got it pulled up here. It's probably really small, but this is what it looks like. And you can go over to state, filter by your state, and just keep on narrowing it down by city or locality. Could be a really useful tool to minimize the administrative burden of actually identifying properties, prospecting. And just like 22.5, you still need to document, but it's not the traditional income documentation. So you still need to keep either a printout or screenshot of the property from the USDA list, or a completed occupancy worksheet that's also signed and a signed owner certification. Let's see. Yeah. Anything on 22.5 or 25.4 from you, Megan?
I would just, again, encourage, if you're going to pursue multifamily, I would encourage folks to utilize these lists to start that journey. Again, it makes income eligibility super simple. You still do have to get demographic information and things like that, but you don't have to do, again, an application and get income documentation. But you have to get the demographic information, and that's part of one of those. I can't remember if it's on the DOE checklist, but the other piece of that is a lot of property owners, property management companies, they can provide you with electronic demographic information because they typically record that information when residents move in. So that can even lend to not having to do an actual application for each unit, because you can collect that demographic information. So it absolutely doesn't hurt to ask if the property you're working with has that information electronically in a spreadsheet type form. You kind of went over making sure, one of the things I noted is making sure the benefits of weatherization go to the actual residents who live in the properties. It does not mean that you cannot provide weatherization services to a property where like the utilities are covered by the property owner or the property management company. There's just more to it that you have to do in order to provide services. There's different caveats. Again, they kind of go over it in the WPN on different ideas of what you can do. And that's really between the grantee and the sub-grantee of what the property owner could provide, or keep that property in affordable housing for an additional 2 to 3 years or something like that. So there are ways around that if the tenants are not responsible for their utilities. And that's a really important question that you have to remember to ask when you are pursuing multifamily, is because sometimes people forget to ask, do the residents have to pay for utilities?
Yeah, which is a great segue into WPN 2213. And this just helps to kind of reaffirm the overarching intention of the Weatherization Assistance Program. Uh, the weatherization in rental properties, whether single family or multifamily, must benefit the residents and not just the property owners. Um, and Megan kind of alluded to it earlier. Multifamily properties, in particular, most of the time they're renter occupied. Rarely will they be owner occupied. And that resident or tenant landlord relationship, that dynamic can complicate compliance, trust, and serving the property. But again, there are ways to make the connection with how weatherization will ultimately benefit the residents, even if it's not directly on their utility bills. And when you weatherize any rental unit, you're stepping into a delicate dynamic again between the resident and the owner. But the resident still realizes the comfort and the security. And tab 22-10 makes sure that they can realize those savings or those improvements without the fear of rent hikes or evictions. So it spells out exactly what protections must be in place. There's no rent increases due to weatherization, no eviction or displacement. And the resident benefits must be clear, direct, and documented. All right. And I think the last of the WPNs that we're going to cover is 22-9, and this is braiding funds. And this is ultimately DOE's roadmap for how to legally and effectively combine multiple funding sources within the same weatherization project. Can you mix DOE, WAP, and LAHEAP? Or how do you bring utility rebates or owner contributions into the mix? And it applies to all weatherization projects, but particularly relevant to multifamily, where a single funding source can often fall short. You don't want to expend your entire annual budget on a single multifamily project. So it provides the guidance on how to layer funding sources, the difference between braiding and blending, which we'll touch on a little bit, and how to stay compliant while ultimately achieving deeper retrofits. The more leveraged resources you bring to the table, the more services you can provide to each individual occupant, and better manage ACPU. So some key components. Some key components are, braiding versus blending funds. Braiding is keeping funding sources separate, but using them on the same building. So, for example, using formula weatherization for air sealing, and then a utility rebate for upgrading or replacing an HVAC system. This requires separate tracking and reporting and eligibility compliance per source. Kind of depends on how your state's structured in operating utility sponsored programs. Then there's blending. So blending is combining funds at the measure level. This is where things get a little more complicated. And this could be where a wall insulation job is partially funded by DOE and LAHEAP. But the overarching objective is to maintain the program integrity, and you don't want to exceed allowable costs, or definitely don't want to skirt any rules. In both cases, whether you're braiding or blending, you need to make sure that you're maintaining clear and auditable documentation. There are also provisions in 22.9 that explain multifamily buy down. And that's when, if a measure doesn't meet like an SIR of 1 or more on DOE funds alone, an owner can contribute, or non-DOE funds can be used to buy down the cost and make it eligible. And that can often come in handy for higher cost. measures, like if there are windows or HVAC replacements being called for. But ultimately, you still need to maintain compliance regardless of your funding source. Make sure that everything is documented separately and not be used to offset DOE cost limits or circumvent the program intent. We want to make sure we're still serving the actual residents, not the owners. So ultimately, the more you know how to braid funds effectively, it will produce deeper retrofits with more savings per resident, and it'll allow you to serve more households, all while maintaining that compliance. Anything on 22.9, Megan, before we move on to WAP Memo 109?
No, again, this came into play more, again, if you're using an energy modeling software in order to do the audit for multifamily, and we predominantly do not use the energy model, so I don't have a lot of input on that right now.
Okay. So for WAP Memo 109, this is a bit of a supplement to WPN 22.5. So it supports what's already allowed under WPN 22.5, and by giving you pre-verified visits of HUD-assisted multifamily buildings. This memo provides a list of multifamily buildings that have been confirmed as eligible for categorical income eligibility through a collaboration between HUD and DOE, and we're going to go into some specifics on that front. This can eliminate a bottleneck for eligible HUD properties, and if the building is listed, you can treat it as categorically eligible under 22.5, and you don't need to verify income for individual residents to meet that 6650 rule. It makes the multifamily project intake a little faster, more accurate, less administratively burdensome, and some key components of it. So if you go to the WAP Memo 109 landing page on DOE's website, you'll notice that there are 3 spreadsheets in the attachments, as well as a PDF that contains a fact sheet in addition to the WAP memo. So again, it's the importance of tracking down the landing page. The 3 spreadsheets, they cover, the first is public housing buildings qualified spreadsheet. So that's HUD public housing buildings that are 100% income eligible. They're on the list, it automatically qualify. The second spreadsheet is public housing further verification required spreadsheet. And these are buildings that might be income eligible, but they'll probably require further verification. And then the last spreadsheet is the assisted multifamily properties spreadsheet, which is a list of privately owned multifamily buildings containing HUD assisted units that will likely be eligible for WAP services. But the subgrantee must still verify that the 6650 rule applies for each building for properties on that list. And the last 2 things I'll note, there's a data dictionary for HUD weatherization lists. It helps to explain each column of the list of the spreadsheets and how to interpret that. So for example, if you pull up one of the spreadsheets, there will be a column for percent assisted, and it'll explain how that's calculated and how to read the eligibility status column, for instance. Yeah, Megan, I feel like you got some.
Yeah, I was gonna say with the assisted multifamily property spreadsheet, the third main bullet down, you do want to make sure that you're reading the far right column with the percent assisted, because they do list projects that are less than 66% assisted, that aren't, say, duplexes or triplexes. So you definitely want to be aware of what those columns mean. So again, if you're seeking out a property, you're seeking out one that say it's 100% or 97% assisted, so it would qualify.
Yeah, Thank you. And the last thing on this is there is a fact sheet that provides updates to previous frequently asked questions that were posted with WPN 22.5. So how do you use the WAP memo? You want to make sure we're complying with DOE requirements. Save copies of the HUD lists with your buildings highlighted and bookmarked. Note the date of the list download in your file so you can show that the building was still listed as eligible at the time of intake. And if the building is not listed, you can still serve the building or serve the property using the occupancy worksheet and owner certification process in WPN 22.5. So it doesn't, WAP Memo 109, it doesn't replace other eligibility pathways. The intention is to help speed along the process. And I think this, I may call an audible. I think this might be a good time to take a break before we go into translating federal rules into state practice. Does that sound good to you, Keisha?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, so it's 2:55 now. Let's just split the top of the hour and plan on coming back by 3:05. All
That's
right.
good. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. All right, we'll give folks another minute. And if the first half of this seemed a little rushed, I wanted to make sure we got through the WPNs and the web memos section, which can be a little drier. And from here on out, we're going to slow it down a little bit. Hopefully we'll have some more engaging conversation about how this can apply from a sub-grantee perspective. So we're going to get started back up. Translating federal rules into state practice. And I'm sure everybody on this call knows this dance. The state plan is really the bridge between the federal intent and the local action that can be taken. And every grantee is going to interpret WPNs slightly differently. So that's why you need to know and read through your state's latest plan, know your audit tool approvals, ask questions early on, not after you submit a project. So first up, we're going to give an overview of the state influence for multifamily weatherization. Like we talked about in the first half, like federal rules like 10 CFR 440 and the WPNs, those establish the national framework, but the state ultimately determines how that framework is actually executed. States decide how to interpret waivers or whether to allow priority lists for multifamily, which audit tools are acceptable, how rent protections are enforced. So understanding your state plan is just as critical as knowing DOE's guidance. There are some examples of how states may vary from one to another. You could go from one state to another and see completely different rules for the same building type. Some states allow for NEAT for small multifamily buildings, while others may require TREAT. You just have to know your state's rules and regulations. Some also accept owner contributions as buy downs, while others don't. And those rules can evolve year by year. In Virginia, where Megan and our experience really lies, for the longest time had a 15% owner contribution requirement. And it wasn't until that owner contribution requirement was eliminated that really opened the floodgates for multifamily weatherization. These differences really stem from each state's plan, and it might also be an indication of your state's level of risk tolerance. But the bottom line is that you must operate within your state policies, even if the federal guidance seems more flexible. Megan, any thoughts?
All right, couldn't get my mouse to work to unmute myself. Yeah, it definitely, I think that's one of the hardest. I mean, not just multifamily weatherization in general. It's one of the hardest things that we run into is states do things differently. And so it is very important that uh, whether you're starting on the journey of multifamily or, um, the state is starting on the journey of multifamily, that the state and subgrantees work together to develop policy, procedure. It really goes a long way because getting those who are out in the field practicing what needs to be done, getting their input. Again, I don't know if we have any grantees on the call or not, but I would just encourage that a great deal to work with subgrantees when developing multifamily policy. And yeah, it can be cumbersome sometimes because again, every state kind of interprets things a little bit differently. So it's really important to understand your state's plan and what their guidance is on multifamily.
And Keisha, I saw you come on camera. Any thoughts on that? Okay, just checking.
Chase, can I
No,
chime
you're
in?
doing great.
Is this where you might encourage providers to lean on neighboring providers within their states?
Yeah, peer exchanges, and which we'll talk a lot about in session 3. Peer exchanges are one of the most valuable tools, and not limited to just within your own state. For instance, actually, right before we went live with this webinar, we were talking internally. CHP last year kind of facilitated a peer exchange focused on low-rise multifamily weatherization. And we're thinking that there may be an opportunity for NCAP to continue that down the line, hopefully as early as maybe early next year. And if you guys think that would be something that would be beneficial, please let us know in either the review of this webinar or in the chat right now. And that will, ideally that will bring to light some of those differences and nuances and the best practices that one state may have that yours may not. You may be able to take that to your policy advisory committee and help to further influence and shape that state plan. So what are some practical implications for the subgrantees? If you're a subgrantee, this means that you can't rely solely on federal guidance. You really have to understand your state's unique implementation strategy. So you might ask yourself, is my state using a multifamily priority list? Are we required to submit every multifamily project for case-by-case review? And are we allowed to blend DOE with other or leverage DOE with utility funds? These kinds of questions can help shape how you plan projects and how you allocate resources, which is another topic that we'll discuss in more detail in session 3 next month. And we've already taken our break, so we'll skip right over that. We're going to move into subgrantee fiscal and programmatic implications. So there's a chance multifamily weatherization may change your entire operational profile, how you operate internally. And you'll need the fiscal systems that can handle longer project timelines, different accounting categories, more complex reporting. Programmatically, it may require deeper engagement with property owners and more intensive and intentional coordination among your internal operations. This is where state level guidance will impact how you set up your budget and your production workflow. So let's get into your fiscal setup. So most subgrantees running single-family weatherization, you probably are operating on a cash flow basis. Multifamily may warrant a work in progress model or a WIP model. These projects can span weeks or months, and a WIP account can help you better track those costs that are accumulating before closing out the project. So that might mean you need new line items in your chart of accounts, new fiscal review timelines, updated controls for tracking cost categories, like sharing system upgrades or common area improvements, which are unlikely for low-rise multifamily, but you may come across on the occasional kind of hybrid low-rise, mid-rise property. We'll mention this at the end of this call, but this is actually a focal point for NCAP's inaugural WAP Energy Summit, a pre-conference session ahead of their annual convention this year, actually next month in Detroit. And we're still taking registrations for that, but the objective is to help the weatherization program managers or directors sync up with ideally their CEOs or executive directors and their fiscal team to help understand what are some of the barriers to smoother operations. And while the session isn't focused on multifamily, we'll certainly be talking about it. So program planning, single family versus multifamily production balance. And I know this is one that Megan can provide a lot of good input. One big challenge that you'll likely face is balancing your single family pipeline with your multifamily projects. Multifamily jobs are often very resource intensive, both in terms of labor and materials. And you don't want a 24 unit project, for instance, to stall your production targets or eat up your annual budget. You'll want to plan your year so multifamily projects land in the shoulder or there's the slower seasons, whether it's the traditional shoulder seasons or otherwise. You'll likely want to track multifamily and single family jobs separately. And some states may incentivize multifamily production. You might check to see if there are any carve-outs or separate targets in your state plan. Megan.
Yeah, so this is a huge, I think a huge factor is going from a predominant agency that does single family to incorporating multifamily takes a lot of strategizing and making sure, like it says, you're not delaying your single family commitments. The other thing, and states do it differently. Every state does a little bit differently. Is most agencies have a fairly lengthy wait list for single family weatherization. And so how do you manage that wait list for single family weatherization while incorporating multifamily projects? So definitely something to consider. And again, I always encourage people, taking small bites at a time. If you have a property owner, for example, that comes to you and is interested in doing multifamily or doing weatherization on one of their multifamilies, if it is say it's a five building project and there's 8 units per building, you don't have to address every single building in one fell swoop. You can address each building as a separate project. That is completely allowable, and a lot of times what is doable due to expenses and again, timelines and resources, and that is okay. The other kind of incentive for that for property owners is that if you can develop those relationships with property owners, property management companies, and set the expectations with them in regards to, hey, we're going to do this building this quarter, and then we'll take on the second building the second quarter. Again, it definitely things you have to keep in mind when you're pursuing multifamily weatherization. Again, I said before, it's not as scary as it's made out to be sometimes. Sometimes you just have to jump in and do it, but there are obviously a lot of considerations when you are trying to go down that path. So, and yes, our crews hate being in multifamilies in the dead of summer or the dead of winter. It's never really fun because you get big attics, and that means you're up there a lot longer. So, just helpful information.
Great point. This also ties into our next session, scaling internal operations, where we'll talk in more depth, more detail about how do you potentially use, well, how do you use multifamily weatherization to help balance out your ACPU, and how a single multifamily project you could span over multiple program years and have that consistency that you can plan for. So stay tuned. Next up, owner contributions and rent restrictions. We touched on this a little bit. Some states allow owner contributions to help make a project pencil out, especially when a measure doesn't meet an SIR threshold using like DOE funds alone. Others prohibit any financial contribution from the owner. Again, it just kind of comes down to knowing your state plan. Similarly, rent restrictions may vary. One state might freeze rent for 12 months. Another might require rent freeze for 24 months. You just need to know those nuances. These details are negotiated at the grantee level, but you need to know what that applies, how that applies to your specific territory. All right. Energy modeling software for multifamily weatherization. Touched on this a bit already, but software that your state approves can limit or enable your multifamily work. Some states might allow for NEAT or Multia, which is, for those that may not be familiar, Multia is the Oak Ridge National Lab, ORNL's produced multifamily energy audit tool. And others may require TREAT for anything larger than a fourplex. And that's targeted retrofit energy analysis tool. If the audit tool is not approved in your state plan, you may need to submit a waiver or pursue a custom approval. And in the meantime, you can also kind of advocate for any additions to the state plan, each state planning period, to include tools that might further enable multifamily weatherization in your state. Of course, knowing these things up front is going to save you and prevent rework and delays. Good to be aware of. Oh. Some key considerations for subgrantees with energy modeling software. If applicable, you may need to see if it handles common area systems, or how it handles base load savings. In many multifamily buildings, if there are shared loads, they present real energy saving opportunities, but not every tool is going to account for them accurately. Systems like TREAT and eQuest are typically have that capability and flexibility for those larger type systems, but they also come with steeper learning curves if your folks are not trained on how to use those. So again, the recurring theme here is know your state plan and choose tools that are approved in your state plan and that your staff can learn. Any additional thoughts on that, Megan?
My love for the priority list, I think, overshadows. Again, we don't, we in Virginia, we have an approved priority list, which we will get to. Again, I'm not trying to steal the thunder,
Right
Chase. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely, when it comes to modeling, that's where things, it can get way more complicated, and understanding, and again, looking at buildings that if they do have central systems, I would encourage you, if you're getting started, avoid those buildings. And I don't think you're going to find a lot of that in low rise, garden style, which is typically, or townhouse style homes. You're not going to find systems that are centralized. On occasion, maybe a water heater system on occasion, because we have seen that. But yeah, definitely the energy modeling part of it, I would encourage, if you look to the experts, reach out to agencies that are utilizing the modeling tool that your state is utilizing to get some input, and that peer-to-peer mentorship when it comes to utilizing whichever modeling tool your state is utilizing. Absolutely.
And next up, we're touching on priority lists. So it's not as common as we might hope it to be, but where multifamily priority lists exists, their use is typically limited to specific building types, often like garden style apartments that have more consistent layouts and systems, particularly individual systems, individual heat, HVAC, individual water heaters. You cannot, you can't, sorry, words. You can't apply a priority list for measures that affect shared systems unless the list explicitly allows it. And again, you got to understand your state plans and check with them and make sure that everything is lined up there. I got a feeling, Megan, I've got a feeling you'd have a couple thoughts on this.
Yeah, again, I would encourage, if there's grantees on, or if you're a sub grantee, talking with your state about getting an approved multifamily priority list. Yes, you absolutely can only use it on certain building types. It has to be wood framed. It has to be 3 stories or less, at 5+ units in a building. And the incidental repair cost can't be more than 10% of the DOE incidental repair cost can't be more than 10%. But there's more when utilizing the priority list. There's more time in the field collecting data that we have found, but the ease of application is above and beyond than doing energy modeling. I mean, for those that again have been in weatherization for years, the weatherization program used to run off of priority list. That's most states never did energy modeling on single family homes. They used priority list, and then there was a big shift back in 2009, 2010, where energy modeling was required for almost every state. Anyway, that history. So the priority list, you have to start with all your health and safety measures, and then you go into the mandatory measures. And your mandatory measures, again, it's going to vary depending on what state you're in, and there's certain mandatory measures, again, depending on climate zone, things like that. But again, you don't have to worry about SIRs. You don't have to worry about the energy modeling side of things. You don't have to worry about buy downs because you don't have SIRs. And it just really allows for ease of getting into multifamily. I was very happy when when our state pursued getting the approved multifamily priority list for us to utilize, because again, it made our life a lot easier. Like I said, there's more time in the field collecting data, but there's no time sitting at a computer entering all of the data points, like with energy modeling. So we have found it, like I said, very easy to use. We've worked with our state. We've kind of developed our own process of all the data that we collect, and there's certain forms, Form H's and Form A's. Form H's is the health and safety checklist that has to be completed on every unit. Again, that's where it's like there's more paperwork, more out in the field data collection, but otherwise, again, it just streamlines the process very greatly.
Yeah, thank you for that, Megan. Next up, we're going to touch, and this is actually our last topic of the day. Oh, we already kind of covered the subgrantee considerations here. I'll briefly touch on a couple of things that Megan may not have mentioned explicitly. If your state does start using priority lists, you might inquire, how was it developed? Was it based off of, neat energy models or treat audits or real time project data? Does it include any limitations on unit counts or age of buildings? Those are going to be some key factors to have in mind. And you'll also want to make sure you understand, as Megan mentioned, which measures qualify, which types of buildings qualify or are eligible, and whether any cost caps apply. That's going to help further define your operations. Yeah.
And there are templates on DOE's website for the priority list, and templates for based on its region 1, 2, 3, and 4, I think, or 1, 2, and 3. I can't remember. So there are templates on DOE's website that you can basically, if your state is whichever climate zone you're in, you choose, and you can just make edits to what's already there. Put it on the state letterhead, obviously go through it and make any changes that your state would want to because you still do have to submit that to DOE for approval once you develop that priority list. But the templates are right there, easy to download and make adjustments and then send in. Use a neighboring states. If a neighboring state has a priority list, that's what Virginia did. That we are good friends with a neighboring state and said, hey, you have an approved priority list. Do you mind if we utilize that? And they did, and made a few changes, submitted it to DOE, and it was approved very quickly. So I would definitely encourage folks to go to the DOE website and look at those templated priority lists.
Thank you, Megan. Our last section, we've got a few slides on waivers. And waivers exist because not every project is going to fit well within standard DOE rules. And you may see this come up with multifamily because maybe your audit tool isn't listed in the state plan, or less common with low rise, but the building may have a mixed use component, particularly in more urban areas. Waivers ultimately give DOE the flexibility to approve exceptions, but they're not guaranteed, and they can take time. So some common waiver requests may include I mentioned before, use of an alternative audit tool. Their waivers for serving buildings with fewer than 66% eligible units, using other eligibility documentation, or waivers that might adjust SIR thresholds for more costly multifamily measures. These waivers really need to be justified with clear documentation that may often include like energy models, cost breakdowns. It may require resident protections. Oh, come on now. There we go. A couple of things to be aware of for waivers. Waivers must go through your grantee. You can't go submit them directly to DOE. You'll likely need a project summary, audit files, maybe eligibility proof, and a rationale that shows how the project aligns with WAP's overall intent and goals. I'm told, I've never gone through a waiver process myself, but I'm told it can take sometimes upwards of 4 to 8 weeks, possibly longer. So you'll need to plan that accordingly and build waiver requests into your that seasonal workflow if you're targeting multifamilies in your shoulder seasons. Anything else on that, Megan?
Not for me.
Okay. And then lastly, on the waivers, if your state has a template for waivers, use it. If not, ask your grantee to create one. The more structured and complete your submission, it will likely be reviewed and hopefully approved quicker. And you want to keep in mind that DOE will prioritize waivers that maximize resident benefit and demonstrate energy savings, even if the project may be more non-traditional or unconventional. So we ran through the second half of this a little quicker than I was anticipating. This is the first iteration of this multifamily WAP series. So we'll be definitely requesting some feedback on ways we can improve and make this as applicable and relevant for you and your operations as possible. I believe Keisha, NCAP will be sending out a survey and along with the slides.
That is correct. In about 2 weeks, give it about 2 weeks. And then for those of you who are looking to recoup your CEUs, you can also do that in about 2 weeks through the BPI portal.
Okay. Well, we do have some time now built in for some Q&A. But one quick note on the surveys, if you can provide some feedback, we'd love to improve how we operate and make this again as relevant and applicable to you and your operations. One thing is we can't see you during these webinars. When I was starting out as a building science and weatherization trainer at CHP's training center, I at least had the benefit of like seeing if eyes are glazing over or if things are just not connecting and being able to dive in a little bit deeper. So in lieu of that ability, the more feedback you can provide us, the more we'd like to improve how we go about delivering these webinars.
Hey Chase, quick question. In the links you mentioned checklist to review. Is that provided in one of the links in the yes, that.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure folks had access to that.
Yeah, this is part
Okay.
of WPN 2212, I believe. And but yeah, we can make sure to.
And if you, the other reason I wanted to make sure folks had access to that, because if you scroll down, it should, I think it has links to all of the relevant WPNs right there in the checklist. So it's just a good thing to have.
Yeah, great resource to have.
Okay, is it time to answer a couple of questions?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, we have one question from Summer Harrison. I'm not sure she's still on the call, but maybe she'll catch the recap. She asks, we're working on a multifamily owned by Houston Housing Authority. My apologies. Your slide said federally owned. Would this require BABA? Specifically, Long Drive Townhomes offers housing through programs such as the Housing Choice Voucher Program, Section 8, subsidized housing, and Veterans Affairs support housing.
My understanding for the Houston Housing Authority, yes, that would definitely require BABA. If I'm understanding the rest of the question. Okay, if
You
the
need to
other,
read it again?
I'm reading it right here.
Okay.
But if I'm understanding, if the properties that you've listed are part of that public housing authority, yes, BABA would apply. If those are HUD properties where I'm sorry, if there are, vouchers being used within privately owned multifamily, then BABA would not apply. Megan, any additional?
Yeah, I was gonna say, regardless of the name, if it's a housing authority, Bob is gonna apply, and I think unless what she is talking about, the Long Drive, if that is a separate property where there's a housing choice, it's a HUD
Yeah.
property, then no, BABA would not apply, but it could, my guess, I think is what she's saying is, it's all one. They're working on Long Drive Townhomes, which is through the Houston Housing Authority. So regardless of if some of those individual townhomes have HUD vouchers, it's still part of a housing authority and BABA would apply.
Okay. Thank you for that. The second question comes from Linda Timbers, and it was kind of a general discussion question, but she says, does anyone know if the HUD categorical can be used for low income tax credit properties?
It cannot,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Separate.
It's yeah, we've they're very specific that LIHTC properties, I just call them LIHTC tax credit properties, are not part of the HUD eligibility or USDA.
Okay. Thank you for that. We have one last comment here in the chat for now, but please, if anyone has any other questions, please post them. An anonymous attendee says, can you please provide the links and other resources along with the slides for those of us that joined late and can't see the chat? Yes, absolutely. Those will be provided. You should see a recap email in the next couple of weeks. Unless, Keisha, I spoke incorrectly. Feel free to correct me.
You're doing great, and you are absolutely correct. Thank you.
If I don't know if there's the functionality, but if folks have questions, I don't know if there's a way to, and they don't want to type them out, can they raise their hand and come off mute? Might be a Kendra question.
Well, we can unmute them.
Okay.
So let me get to, okay, it said type Aiden. Let me get to where I can unmute you.
Hello?
There you
Go
are.
ahead.
Hi. I'm sorry to ask this question again in a slightly different way, but the precision and specificity matters here. So if I'm understanding what you said about BABA requirements on HUD and housing authority properties, just because a property is on that HUD list does not make it required to be BABA compliant. If it is a housing authority or federally owned, yes, but just because it's I think it's Section 8 or Section 11, that doesn't necessarily trigger BABA.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And can you reiterate one more time how we can be sure that even though it's on the HUD list, it might not be required BABA compliant?
It would have to be on their specific PHA list.
Right.
If it is on a PHA list, BABA's required. If it's on the I think it's the third list. It's the, I can't remember the exact name of the list right now. But it's the third list in, it's
On
like
the database?
HUD assisted multifamily properties, I think is something, what it's called. If it's on that list, it does not require BABA. It's not a public housing authority.
It's the assisted multifamily properties list. I'll put it in the chat right now.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
I don't see any others at the moment, but please raise your hand if you have any.
All right, then. I guess, is there another question in the chat?
Yes.
Miss
do you-
Linda wants to know, oh, I'm sorry, Jesse. Go
Nope,
ahead.
you go right
Miss Linda, okay, Miss Linda wants to know how often the HUD lists are updated.
I believe they're supposed to be updated annually. I don't believe that's historically been the case.
I was going to say that is my thought process as well. What we have typically done is we've pulled that list at the beginning of the year, say, and then we go back to the source every year and pull it again just to make sure there's been no additional updates. But yes, I think it's supposed to be done annually. I don't know that actually happens, but.
Yeah, I'm looking at the WAP memo 109. I'll share my screen again, and it looks like at least these are the attachments for WAP memo 109, and yeah, there's public housing buildings qualified spreadsheet. That may have been what we were referring to earlier, but yeah, these have not been updated, at least according to these notes, since December 2023. I think WAP memo 109 is in the chat already. Okay, so. Okay, that's for another question. Oh. Quite welcome. Well, if am I still okay? I'm still sharing. I guess if there's no other questions, we can give you guys some time back. Here's our contact information if you have some follow-up questions for us, and we'll make sure to include. Oh, yeah, Keisha.
I just wanted to just thank everyone again for being here and doing the work that you do to make homes more energy efficient, because there's families out there who need it the most. Also, don't forget, these presentation slides will be emailed to you. Give it about 2 weeks. And don't forget that this is a part of a series. So this was part 2. We do have 4 more. If for some reason you do not have the registration link, please reach out to me. I will put my email in the chat, and I'll go ahead and send you the link if you need it. I just wanted to put that out there, Chase. You can finish with the AC 25 and all that good stuff.
And yeah, on that note, just so folks are aware, you probably saw the schedule when you registered for this. Session 3 next month will be covering how to scale internal operations. Session 4 we'll be looking at process overview, key stakeholders, and communications. Session 5 we'll be looking at how do you actually launch your first project. And then session 6, which is the last of our series, this multifamily WAP series, will be in October, and it's managing and closing out your first project. Megan has offered to support our next session, session 3. So she'll be back, and hopefully we can get her back on for another one or two. And we'll also have some other guests, some guest presenters that are active subgrantees doing the work right now.
There's one question in the chat, Chase, I'm sorry.
I see it now.
Linda says, will you be discussing common area measures in any of the future trainings?
So this series is focused more on like the programmatic operational side of things. I don't believe we have any content around common area measures at this time, but if there's an interest, we could always look at potentially a separate webinar that we can put together. Good question. All right. Don't forget, we mentioned it earlier, but NCAP's annual convention is next month in Detroit, Michigan, the last week of August. The pre-conference sessions are August 25th and 26th. The WAP Energy Summit, the inaugural WAP Energy Summit, will be Tuesday, August 26th. Megan will also be there along with me. And there's some really great sessions coming out of AC 25, Annual Convention 25, including a weatherization specific track. And that's our WAP Energy Summit promo as well. Don't forget to register.
There would be some great information and great folks speaking. Highly encourage you to get your teams there.
All right, we won't drag this out any longer. Enjoy 10 minutes back to your day, I suppose.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.